Hello guys and girls, and welcome back to Inspiration Clan. In this tutorial we are going to be looking at layers. Now this is a beginner tutorial, so if you're slightly more advanced you can look at the intermediate tutorial, or if you're super advanced you can go on to the advanced tutorial on layers. So let's jump straight into Photoshop, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a image. Now I have this image of this of these windows, these colored windows. And what you'll see straight away is that this image is opened as the background layer. Now the background layer by default is locked, so you can see this lock icon. Now if you see this icon on any of your layers, it means they are locked and you won't be able to edit them. So to unlock this layer, what you can do is simply click on this lock icon. Okay, so you'll see this change now. So now this is a free layer and we can edit as we like. So first things first, I just want to show you how to look at the properties of a layer and where they are located. So the first thing you can do is right click on the layer, and you're going to get all the layer settings and layer properties here. You can also come up to the menu, the layer menu, and you've got all these options here. So there's various different settings and properties for layers, so you can adjust them in here. So I won't go through them all, but for now I just want to let you know that that's where you find the properties. So how do we create layers? Now the answer is there are many different ways to create layers, but the simplest one is to simply come down to the new layer icon down here. So if I come down to the bottom and I hover over this icon, you're going to see we get this create a new layer tooltip. So if I just click that, you're going to see a new layer appear. So that's one way to create a new layer. However, there are other ways. There are adjustment layers which can be created here. So if we create a solid color adjustment layer, that's going to look slightly different there. So we can just cancel that. And then we have other ways. If we create a text layer, that's going to be different. If we create a shape layer, that's also going to be different. But for now, we'll create a new layer down here, and we'll create a couple of new layers there. So when the layers are open, you will see them in the layer stack. This is called the stack over here. If you can't see this layer stack, then what you want to do is come up to Window and come down to Layers. Now you can press F7, the keyboard shortcut, to show and hide. However, you can just simply click and that's going to reveal the layer stack for you. So we have our layers over here on the right, and what we can do is simply double click on the name of the layer, and that will allow us to rename. So maybe I want to call this one 3, and this layer 2, and this layer 1. So there you go, nice and easy to rename layers. Now to delete a layer, the easiest way to do that is to click on the layer and simply drag it down to the bin down here. And we do that and you can see that that layer is deleted. So it's super easy to create layers and super easy to delete layers. Now these layers by default are completely transparent. They don't have any information, any pixels filled in these layers. They are blank. And you can tell that from this icon. The icon has like a checkered pattern, which in Photoshop means transparent. So for example, if we turn off the background layer, none of our layers have any pixels or any color or any information on them. So we have a transparent background, which you can see by this transparent pattern, this sort of mosaic-y kind of pattern. So let's turn the background layer back on. So that's the basics of how to create, where to find the layer properties. And now what I want to do is just show you some other simple things or some basics to do with layers. So if we come up to where it says kind here, we're going to get this drop down. We can click on that, and you can see here we've got name, which is the second option in the drop down. So let's click on name. And what you're going to see now is we have this search box. So in here we can actually search for layers. Now when you're creating layers in Photoshop, now we only have 3. Maybe in your projects you're going to have hundreds of layers. So if you name them correctly, you can then come up and search and find those layers super quick. So I'm going to just search 2. You can see there the layer that we named number 2 appears. So if I just remove that, and then let's search 1 for example, and you can see layer 1 appears. So again, super quick. Now one thing to know about layers, and this is probably the most important thing, is that this layer stack, where your layer is will depend on the visibility of your layer. So layers at the bottom are essentially in the background. Any layer above will appear in front of that layer. So let's simply come up, let's just make a quick selection like a square. And then what I'm going to do with layer 1 selected, I'm just going to come up to edit and fill. And I'm just going to fill that layer with the foreground color. Okay, all good. And I'm going to do the same over here. And I'm going to come up to over to layer 2. I'm going to come up to edit and fill. I'm just going to fill that with the background color. So now we have these solid colors which are on these layers. So let's just deselect. So we've got the background layer here, then we've got this blue square, and then we've got the black square. So if you click on that layer and then come up and select your move tool here, we can simply click and we can drag that layer around, and we can do the same with the black box. So we have these two layers. So by default, this black box is going to be on top of all other layers because it's at the top of the layer stack. So if I click and drag this over the blue box, you can see that that appears in the foreground. That's because it's at the top. So if we swap this around, so if we click this blue layer, this blue square, and drag it above the black square layer, then you can see it comes to the foreground. So it's super simple in terms of layers, but you do have to remember that when you have a document with lots of layers. Maybe you're working and you can't see a layer, for example, so let's just swap that background. Let's put the black layer above, select the blue layer, we've got our move tool selected, and let's just move that layer behind the black layer. So in this case, you know that this blue square is there, however you can't see it, and that is purely because it's hidden by the layers above. So do bear that in mind. It's a very common sort of problem to run into as a new user getting used to working with layers. So if that's the case, you can simply drag that across. Now you also want to look at layer visibility. Now we have this little eye icon next to every single layer. So what that allows us to do is turn a layer off. So if I turn that layer off, the black box, we can just see the blue box now, and vice versa. If I turn this blue box off, you can see we're transparent, and I can put the background on. So you can swap and change the visibility as you like, which is super handy when you have a document with lots and lots of layers. I also want to quickly show you the opacity and sort of some other settings to do with layers. Opacity is one of the main ones, so that is exactly as it sounds. So if we click on this blue square layer and we come over here and we just set this opacity to 50, you can see that it does exactly that. Now this layer is only 50% opacity, so we can see through. It has a transparency. So let's set the black layer to 20. Now you can very faintly see that, so let's put that up to 50 as well, and you can see that these layers are now 50% transparent. You can click on this word opacity and grab the scrubber and drag it up and down to change the opacity as well. That's another little tip for you there. Now, working with layers can also get very complicated the more layers that you have. So one important thing to do, or maybe you're working on a document with multiple people who are going to be using it, you're going to save it and pass it to a colleague. What you can do is color code your layers. So maybe you want all the layers that are shapes to be blue, for example. So in this case, what you can do is you can right click on the layer. That's going to bring up the properties, as we said earlier. You can see down here at the bottom, we've got colors. So you can simply click on a color, let's say blue, and that is going to give your layer a blue color. So let's do the same here and give a red. So that is a quick way for you to sort of define your layers and make it easy to arrange your layers. So you can quickly go in and say, okay, all the red layers are these shapes, or all the blue layers are layer adjustments. So keep your documents nice and organized. Make sure you name your layers, and it will make it easier for yourself in the future. So there you go. That's a very basic introduction to layers and some simple properties and settings. In the next video, we'll go a bit more in depth and look at some advanced features to do with layers. So thank you very much for joining me. I shall see you in the next video.